Iosif Vissarionovich Djugashvili, later known as Joseph Stalin, was born in Gori, Georgia in 1878. His childhood was harsh, marked by poverty and an abusive father. This difficult upbringing may have contributed to his later ruthlessness. Stalin's mother, a devout Orthodox Christian, wanted him to become a priest. He enrolled in a theological seminary in Tiflis, the Georgian capital. However, Stalin's interest in religion waned as he became increasingly drawn to Marxist ideology. He joined the Russian Social Democratic Labour Party, which advocated for the overthrow of the Tsarist regime. Stalin's revolutionary activities led to his expulsion from the seminary and multiple arrests and exiles to Siberia. These experiences solidified his commitment to the revolutionary cause and shaped his worldview. Stalin became a skilled organizer and propagandist for the Bolsheviks, the radical faction of the party led by Vladimir Lenin. He adopted the pseudonym Stalin, meaning man of steel in Russian, reflecting his unwavering determination. The early 20th century was a tumultuous time in Russia, with widespread social unrest, economic hardship, and political instability. These conditions created fertile ground for revolutionary movements like the Bolsheviks to flourish. The outbreak of World War I in 1914 proved to be a turning point in Russian history. The war exacerbated existing social and economic problems, weakening the Tsarist regime and paving the way for revolution. In February 1917, Tsar Nicholas II was forced to abdicate, ending centuries of Romanov rule. A provisional government was established, but it proved unable to address the country's problems effectively. The Bolsheviks, led by Lenin and with Stalin playing a key role, saw this as their opportunity to seize power. In October 1917, the Bolsheviks, led by Lenin, staged a coup d'état in Petrograd, overthrowing the provisional government and seizing control of the country. This event, known as the October Revolution, marked the beginning of the Russian Civil War, a brutal conflict between the Bolshevik Red Army and the anti-Bolshevik White Army. The Civil War raged for 5 years and resulted in millions of casualties. Stalin played a crucial role in the Bolshevik victory, serving as a military commissar and demonstrating his ruthlessness and organizational skills. Following the Bolshevik victory in 1922, the Soviet Union was established, encompassing much of the former Russian Empire. Lenin became the leader of the new communist state, but his health was declining after a series of strokes. A power struggle ensued within the Bolshevik party to succeed Lenin. Stalin, initially a relatively obscure figure, strategically positioned himself to gain influence. He assumed the role of General Secretary of the Communist Party, a position that allowed him to control appointments and build a loyal following. Stalin used his position to outmaneuver his rivals, including Leon Trotsky, Lenin's presumed successor. He exploited divisions within the party and skillfully used propaganda and repression to consolidate his power. By the late 1920s, Stalin had emerged as the undisputed dictator of the Soviet Union. Trotsky was forced into exile in 1929 and later assassinated in Mexico in 1940 on Stalin's orders. Stalin's rise to power marked a turning point in Soviet history, ushering in an era of totalitarian rule characterized by rapid industrialization, forced collectivization, and brutal political repression. Having consolidated his power, Stalin embarked on an ambitious program of rapid industrialization and economic transformation. He believed that the Soviet Union, lagging behind the West in terms of industrial development, needed to modernize rapidly to compete on the world stage and ensure its survival. In 1928, Stalin launched the first of a series of 5-year plans which aimed to transform the Soviet Union from a predominantly agrarian society into a major industrial power. These plans centralized economic control in the hands of the state. They set ambitious targets for the production of coal, steel, oil, and other industrial goods. To achieve these targets, Stalin implemented a policy of forced collectivization of agriculture. Private land ownership was abolished and peasants were forced to join collective farms, known as kolkhozes. The idea was to consolidate land holdings and increase agricultural efficiency, providing resources and manpower for industrialization. However, collectivization met with fierce resistance from peasants. They resented the loss of their land and the harsh conditions imposed by the state. The disruption caused by collectivization also led to a sharp decline in agricultural output. Section 5. Collectivization and its costs. Collectivization had a devastating impact on the Soviet countryside. Millions of peasants were dispossessed of their land and livestock. Many were deported to labor camps or exiled to remote areas. Resistance to collectivization was met with brutal repression. The most tragic consequence of collectivization was the Holodomor, a man-made famine that ravaged Ukraine and other grain-producing regions of the Soviet Union from 1932 to 1933. The Soviet government's policies, including the confiscation of grain from peasants, exacerbated the famine. Millions of Ukrainians and other Soviet citizens died of starvation. The Holodomor is considered by many historians to be an act of genocide, deliberately orchestrated by Stalin's regime to eliminate Ukrainian national identity and crush resistance to collectivization. The famine had a profound impact on Ukrainian society and left a lasting scar on the national psyche. Despite the human cost, Stalin's 5-year plans achieved significant industrial growth. The Soviet Union made impressive strides in industrial production, becoming a major military power by the late 1930s. However, this progress came at a terrible price. The Soviet people endured immense suffering, oppression, and loss of life during this period of rapid transformation. Section 6. The Great Purge. As Stalin consolidated his power and pursued his ambitious economic goals, he grew increasingly paranoid about potential threats to his rule. He saw enemies everywhere, both real and imagined. In the mid-1930s, this paranoia culminated in the Great Purge, a period of intense political repression that engulfed the Soviet Union. From 1936 to 1938, millions of people were arrested, imprisoned, tortured, or executed on trumped-up charges of treason, espionage, sabotage, and other political crimes. No one was safe from Stalin's paranoia. High-ranking party officials, military leaders, intellectuals, artists, writers, and ordinary citizens were caught in the web of terror. Stalin used show trials, forced confessions, and mass executions to eliminate anyone he perceived as a threat to his power. The Great Purge decimated the ranks of the Communist Party, the Red Army, and Soviet society as a whole. It created an atmosphere of fear, suspicion, and paranoia that permeated every aspect of Soviet life. The purges had a devastating impact on the Soviet Union's intellectual, cultural, and military capabilities. They left a lasting legacy of trauma and fear that continued to haunt Soviet society for decades to come. Section 7. World War II and its aftermath. The outbreak of World War II in 1939 had profound consequences for the Soviet Union and Stalin's rule. In August 1939, Stalin signed a non-aggression pact with Nazi Germany, known as the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact. This pact, which included a secret protocol dividing Eastern Europe into spheres of influence, shocked the world. It allowed Hitler to conquer Poland without Soviet interference, triggering the start of the war. However, the pact proved to be short-lived. In June 1941, Hitler broke the agreement and launched a surprise attack on the Soviet Union, Operation Barbarossa. The German invasion caught Stalin off guard. The Soviet Union, weakened by the purges of the 1930s, suffered heavy losses in the early months of the war. However, the Soviet people rallied to defend their homeland, and the Red Army, despite its initial setbacks, eventually halted the German advance. The Battle of Stalingrad, a brutal 6-month siege that began in August 1942, marked a turning point in the war. The Soviet victory at Stalingrad at a tremendous human cost shattered the myth of German invincibility and turned the tide of the war in favor of the Allies. Section 8. The Cold War and Stalin's Final Years. As World War II came to an end in 1945, a new geopolitical order emerged. The Soviet Union, having played a decisive role in defeating Nazi Germany, emerged as a superpower, its territory expanded and its influence extending across Eastern Europe. However, the wartime alliance between the Soviet Union and the Western Allies, the United States and Great Britain, soon crumbled. The ideological divide between the communist East and the capitalist West deepened, leading to the Cold War, a period of geopolitical tension, rivalry, and proxy conflicts that lasted for decades. Stalin's final years were marked by increasing paranoia and repression. He tightened his grip on power, purging perceived enemies, both real and imagined. The Soviet Union, under Stalin's leadership, played a key role in shaping the post-war world. However, his policies also contributed to the divisions and tensions that characterized the Cold War era. Stalin's health deteriorated in his later years. He suffered a stroke in 1945, which reportedly affected his mental faculties and intensified his paranoia. Section 9. Legacy of a Dictator. Joseph Stalin died on March 5, 1953, at the age of 74. His death marked the end of an era in Soviet history. Stalin's legacy is complex and highly contested. He is remembered as one of the most brutal dictators in human history, responsible for the deaths of millions of his own people through purges, forced labor, and famine. His regime was characterized by totalitarian control, widespread repression, and a cult of personality that glorified him as an infallible leader. However, Stalin is also credited with transforming the Soviet Union into a major industrial and military power, playing a key role in defeating Nazi Germany. He left behind a legacy of modernization and expansion, but also one of fear, suffering, and the suppression of individual rights. In the aftermath of Stalin's death, his successor, Nikita Khrushchev, initiated a process of de-Stalinization, denouncing his predecessor's crimes and excesses. However, Stalin's legacy continues to shape Russian politics and society to this day. He remains a controversial figure, admired by some for his strength and determination, reviled by others for his brutality and tyranny. Stalin's life and rule serve as a stark reminder of the dangers of unchecked power, the importance of human rights, and the enduring human capacity for both good and evil.